Welcome to Vancouver Business Network, where entrepreneurs learn, network, and grow. I am Roger Killen, the organizer. Our weekly workshop for entrepreneurs is brought to us by TELUS Business, the fastest and most reliable pure fiber broadband network in Metro Vancouver. Our speaker is Monika Becker. Having experienced her own transitions and transformations, Monika strives to live a self-directed and peaceful life and show others how to do the same. Monika's clients are committed to achieving lasting inner balance, peace, and joy. Monika is a published author, she's an accomplished trainer, she's an international speaker, and she offers her services in both English and German. Vancouver Business Network members and most welcome guests, I now invite you to put your hands together and give Monika Becker a VBN welcome.
Thank you one and all for being here in the room and filling the house. And thank you also to my online audience for watching this presentation. My intention for tonight is to produce 3 takeaways for you, which are for you to get an understanding of where your doubts, judgment, and fears actually come from, what causes them. Also, to understand where the limitations are of our traditional methods of healing and coping. And then, of course, we will dive into a little bit deeper into understanding the Dalian Method, how you can create confidence, joy, and freedom with that marvelous, groundbreaking tool. So those are my 3 intentions for tonight, and off we go. About a little over 2 years ago, out of the blue, I slid into a full-fledged identity crisis. It was one of the hardest, but also one of the most formative and valuable experiences in my life. I felt like this woman on the screen that you're seeing right now. I felt a physical void in me. I felt empty. Nothing really made sense anymore. Nothing externally or internally made sense to me anymore. My life kind of crumbled, like it had lost its meaning. I was really wondering, what on earth am I doing with my life? What am I here for? I felt like knocked off from my feet. I didn't know my sense of purpose anymore, which before I kind of always had that, but it was all of a sudden it was gone. In environments like this, like a network environment, professional meetings, I felt like a fraud. Here I was proud with my business name, Clear Directions Coaching, and I didn't even have a direction myself anymore. Like, how could I possibly claim to be a coach and help other people find their way in life? I felt like, no, I'm a fraud. I'm not real anymore. And that didn't feel good. Deep down, the question was, who am I? And that's one of the most important questions I could ever have asked myself. Luckily, at the time, I came across a method called the Dalian Method. And here's the thing, over years, decades, I had practiced affirmations. I had attended numerous self-help and personal growth workshops and seminars. I had read many self-help books. I had engaged in massages, Reiki, EFT, you name it. And I knew deep down, none of that would be able to get me out of that hole that I felt I was stuck in. But intuitively, I knew when I first heard about this method that this was something for me, that this was the key to my improvement, my feeling better, and my getting a solid sense of self again. So as I was working with the Dalian Method, actually I worked with a facilitator and I worked with it at home. And that is the beauty and one of the strengths of this method, that you're not dependent on a facilitator. It has been designed in a way that you can do the work at home by yourself, interspersed with facilitated sessions, just the way like I did it. So over the next about 6 months, what I did, I had about 1 session per month with a facilitator. And then I worked with a couple of sessions during, like in between, on my own at home. And here is what I experienced and what I learned. I had repressed so many thoughts about myself, so much doubt about myself, so many pieces and ways of insecurities, that all of a sudden they had become so much and so overwhelming that, like I said, I felt empty. There wasn't anything anymore. But through this method, I was able to actually discover them and become aware of them, which was one of the greatest gifts I have ever received. Because all of a sudden I could see that I had always not trusted myself. Over decades, I had doubts about who I was, whether I was trustworthy, whether I was deserving of love. I had experiences that I interpreted in a way that I wasn't trustworthy to others, that I couldn't be relied upon, that I was a loser in a way, that I couldn't achieve my goals. And to become aware of all those thoughts and emotions that I had repressed wasn't easy. But it definitely helped me to slowly but steadily build myself up again. Let me just give you an example of what kind of an awareness came up in my very first session that I had with Kindy, who is the facilitator that I decided to work with. When I basically met with her for the first time, I became aware of my fear of the unknown. Like, I'm German by background, and I have always been thriving on knowing what the next day would bring. I was an avid planner, and I kind of gained a sense of security from knowing what was ahead of me. But for me to face the unknown, like in that situation, when I felt empty and I didn't know what my life was about anymore, I felt scared because I didn't know what was ahead of me. I didn't know how am I defining myself? Who am I going to be tomorrow or next month? So for me to actually befriend the unknown, which I learned in that very first session with Kindy, and to actually be getting a little bit excited about it, it provided me with such a sense of peace in a way already after that very first session, that I knew, okay, even if I feel totally ripped apart right now, I know there is something, a foundation on which I can grow up my self-esteem and my sense of self again. And that was just in the very first session. So overall, over those last 6 months, what I learned was to peel away one layer after another of repressed thoughts and limitations that I had put upon myself, to not believe in myself and to interpret life's events in a way that they were totally limiting me. And that had obviously become too much, so that I needed to deal with it and to face my insecurities and my fears and my doubts that I was carrying inside. So for me then, what I learned was that actually nothing is ever wrong with me, that there are no mistakes, that there are just opportunities to learn. And those were, and as I said, for me to actually also feel safe in not having a structure, but to face the unknown and to face it with open arms, and to be okay, to know that whatever life brings to me is something that I can deal with, and not just that I can deal with, that actually brings joy and excitement and beautiful surprises. So after those 6 months then, I basically felt like, okay, I feel solid again. There is a solid sense of myself that started to grow again. And actually, it was a physical sensation that I felt like there was almost like a rod right in the middle of my body that felt solid again. And that I started to feel that after the first or second session. And from there on, it started to grow and it started to fill me up again. Life makes sense anymore. Life started to make sense again. That was how I felt after the 6 months. I felt that I was connecting to a sense of direction again. I knew that I can trust myself, even if it wasn't 100% in all situations. I knew that there was a solid trust within myself that I could rely on. And I started to know myself better and actually get excited about exploring myself even more and get to know myself much better than I had ever done before. So the excitement for me then also became to actually start to work with my clients with this method. Because looking at, I was a little too fast. Because I knew that this method had brought me so much more peace and connection to my own self that I felt like, well, I have found the diamond now. I can work with my clients in the same way and offer them a tool with they can permanently and completely transform their own doubts and insecurities and fears into a solid sense of self and gain all of that confidence and freedom that they're actually looking for. So that excitement for me started about a year and a half ago. Until then, I finally signed up for the training to become a Dalian Method facilitator just this past May. And now I'm in a position to work with my own clients and offer them the same kind of transformation that I was granted originally. So the agenda for tonight then is for all of us to first of all look at success. We had our little networking interaction before my talk started where you shared what you define as success. So we'll look at that and get a better understanding of what actually is in your way of achieving that success. Then we will look at the causes of all of the factors that are in your way of becoming successful. We'll look at the ways how traditional healing methods and coping mechanisms work and where the limitations are. And then, as I promised before, we'll take a look at how the Dalian method was created, what makes it so different from other healing methods, and how it can help you to achieve those things that you consider to be your success. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Then we'll move on. Okay, so how do you define success? Many of you define success as happiness and joy, as abundance, as a feeling of inner peace, freedom to do whatever you want to do and do it in your own time and have the financial freedom. There were some components of material success as well, but most of the things that you described as your success, they had a lot of internal flavors to them, that inner peace, the joy, the happiness. So what actually is in your way of achieving that? What causes your judgment, doubt, and fears that to some degree, I would assume we all have experienced in our life and might even be experiencing them right now. When we are born, the first moment that we come out of that safe, warm womb, many babies have an awful experience. They're thrown out into the world, neon lights, there's lots of noise. Maybe they're put away into a little bed and nobody looks after them right away. So oftentimes, those are the first moments where thoughts and beliefs are formed in a human being's life. So this little baby might make an assumption about itself that it's all alone, that people are just not nice. Depending on what the situation is, yeah, that might be their justified assumption. And then there is a substantial fear, a fear to not survive, a fear of dying. which makes sense. In our early years, of course, we are dependent on our parents, right? Our survival depends on them taking care of us. So there is a real fear. But oftentimes what happens as adults when we grow older and become independent, we actually no longer remember that that fear might still be somewhere in the back of our mind. And we never really own up to the fact that now we are actually okay and to be independent. Nobody loves me. That's a assumption that many people come to as well in very early stages of their life. Now life happens, and as it happens, there's more of those same thoughts that we start to pile up. It's about not being loved, not being heard, maybe feeling like a loser, feeling angry, but not being able to express it. Because for many of us, we are brought up in a way that kind of like, you shut up, when you put your feet under my table, you eat what comes on the table, and you don't talk, don't say this, say something else. At school, you're being taught the same thing. You got to shut up, you got to follow the rules, you got to follow what the teacher says. So our individuality actually gets limited and restricted. So that in the end, we are actually also, in addition to all of those assumptions that we make about ourselves and other people and life and our role in life, there's the social and the religious conditioning. You have to follow the rules, right? The rules of the house, the rules of the parents, the rules in school, the rules in society. There is the balance of right and wrong, of good and bad. And we try to do our best, like most of us, I would assume, to fit in, right? Because we don't want to be rejected. We want to be loved. So many of us strive to fit into those rules. Individuality is oftentimes not welcome, right? So what do? We adapt. We try to fit in and not rock the boat. So those are all limitations that we put upon ourselves, which when they never get expressed, they never find their way out, they actually do create energetic blockages in our bodies. And what they create are oftentimes physical pain, diseases, stress, anxiety. It's the emotional and physical pain that gets created by all of those thoughts and assumptions and beliefs that we have gathered over life and that we have never really looked at, so much so that we might oftentimes not even be aware of what those thoughts are that cause us the pain that we are experiencing. So who here has ever been in a situation where you were wanted to deal with an issue, you had pain, physical, emotional, or other challenges in your life? And what were some of the ways, like the traditional ways, of how you tried to cope and to help yourself? Just by the show of hands, what did you guys do? Jen, what did you do? What kind of practices did you use?
I would walk away.
You would walk away? Okay. Anybody else?
I would just bury deep down as far as possible.
Okay. Right. Okay, so you were hiding away as well. Yeah, Jocelyn.
I would cry.
You would cry. Okay, well, that's at least progress, because at least you would express your emotions. Patty.
Wine.
Wine. There you go. Yeah. Good. Thanks. That's one way of dealing with it. Mark.
Minimize it. Just completely minimize it, not value it.
Okay, so minimizing was another comment, not valuing the thing at all. How about you, Dalan?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Walk away.
Walk away as well. So there seems to be a pattern here. Lori.
Label it and try to find help.
Label it and try to find help. So what kind of help would you find?
Somebody that might know something about helping you.
Okay, so an expert, a
therapist.
facilitator. Yeah, okay. How about you, Andrew?
Get it over.
Get
Get it over.
Get it over. But how did you do that?
Find a way.
Find a way. What way? For example, give me an example.
Like on the screen.
Okay, so some people engage in meditation and yoga. That's what we do. Roger.
Binge eat.
Binge eat. There you go. Yeah. So we try ways to cope and to stuff it down or to numb it, to numb the pain. That's what we oftentimes do. And there's very valid ways of how to deal with the pain, like yoga and meditation. They have their value and they do work. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. Thinking positive is another way. Like I've engaged for decades in affirmations. And yes, they do work. And to the degree, and I had a conversation with Tien and Nabil before we started the structured part of our meeting. And I shared with them that there were times in my life where I was saying one thing, but I was knowing inside that that was not 100% the truth. Whether it was an affirmation or something else, it just didn't click. I knew that it was off kilter. They didn't align. What I was coming out of my mouth was not the truth that I felt inside. And that didn't help, right, to deal with the pain that I was feeling, which was more emotional pain. People might do EFT, tapping, or they engage in spiritual practices, which I've done it as well, right? And they all helped me along the way, but they never were able to actually fill that hole that I still felt, or they were not able to help me with finding the meaning that I was looking for.
What does EFT mean?
Thank you for asking. It's emotional freedom technique. It's a tapping technique where you tap certain spots on your body, and that helps to release the energy and the energy flow in the body. And I think they also use affirmations with that, if I remember well. Some people start to journal, which is a good way, right, of reflecting and what might all these things mean, and they give you some meaning and perspective. People go to coaches and counselors to engage in conversation to make sense of their past, or things that I've definitely engaged in. People read a lot of books, self-help books, go to seminars and workshops. Then there's the material way, right? Like how we try to fill that hole. We buy houses and cars and go on expensive trips, whether we can afford them or not, right? So and then when we engage in relationships, because we feel like maybe the other person can fill me up and make me whole and make me complete, right? There's nothing wrong with beautiful relationships, believe me. And in the end, the other person can never fill any hole that any of us feel inside of ourselves. That's the work that we have to do ourselves. So in the end, at least it was my experience, and I think it relates to many people, that while all of these methods and techniques help to some degree, there's still this question, there's still something missing. So what is that missing piece? I believe it's consciousness that is the missing piece between what people really are after, which is the happiness, the joy, the inner balance, that inner peace. When you look at this picture of the iceberg with the human body on top of it, this is how most of us live our life. We have about 10% of our body is our mind, which is the cognitive mind. That's what we're using most of the time. Like with the iceberg, there's about 90% that's swimming underneath the surface of the ocean. It's not visible. People oftentimes don't look at it, but in the end, that's what's running the iceberg. That's what determining where life will lead you. Let me make it more practical. For example, if I have the thought that I am a strong person and I can achieve all of my goals and I'm a winner, that's my 10% thinking up here. But if over decades I have told myself that I'm a loser because early in my childhood I had an experience where I wasn't able to, actually it's my experience, I wasn't able to make peace between my parents, and I thought that's a really bad thing that I wasn't able to do that. So I've been thinking for decades that I'm a loser because I wasn't able to make peace between my parents, which as a matter of fact is none of my business, and they were splendid parents and they eventually got like they made peace between themselves. But I had that thought over decades that I'm a loser in that way. So now when my cognitive mind tells me, oh, I'm a winner and I'm going to do this and life is going to be fine and dandy, guess what? That undercurrent of me feeling like I'm a loser is going to have a say in that, right? So there might be some intermittent success and whatnot, but in the end, I've never been able to achieve that success until a few years back, right? When I was finally realizing, well, that is what I've been thinking all along. And I then was finally able to let it go. So it's all of those repressed thoughts and emotions that keep us from actually living that freedom, that happiness and joy, that in one form or another, we're all after that. And we can have it. So let me introduce you to Mada Eliza Dalian, because she is the person who actually has developed a tool to make that 90% of unconscious thoughts and emotions accessible to us, with a magnificent tool that helps us to become aware of them and to completely and permanently transform them. Mada is a scientist of the human condition. And what I mean by that is, as a young girl, she started to be interested in how humans work and what her life is all about. At the age of 5, she witnessed how her grandfather passed away in the bed right beside her. And the smart cookie that she was at the time already, she figured out, okay, grandpa is gone and life is carrying on as though nothing had happened. So that will at some point happen to me. So before I die, I want to know who I am. And I want to know what my life is all about. So from that time on, she's always had this inquisitive mind to find out what life is all about and how humans function and how to improve them. She is an award-winning and best-selling author. One of her books has been also endorsed by Deepak Chopra. So this book she has written over seven years, and they're both highly worth your while to dive in if you are eager to find out who you are and how you can evolve. And she's a self-realized master of healing and transformation, which then the Dalian Method is one of the products that she offers to the world. Mada says that consciousness is the master key to permanent healing and transformation. There is a direct relationship between the level of consciousness and the level of our joy, freedom, confidence, and peace. Meaning that the more conscious we are, the more we can develop our joy, freedom, confidence, peace, success, balance, happiness, whatever it is that you do want to experience. In other words, the bigger your judgments, doubts, and fears are, it's probably related that you're very unaware and unconscious of those thoughts and emotions that are still running your life as an undercurrent or like a computer program. So the more we grow in consciousness in that 90% that is buried, where the thoughts and emotions are buried, the more we grow that consciousness, the more you can achieve all of those things that you describe as your success. Mada has one very unique ability, which is for her to actually read and discover areas of consciousness and unconsciousness in people's bodies. And she can identify the repressed thoughts that we carry in our bodies and the emotions, and she can label and pinpoint them. Yes.
How does she do that?
It's a gift. Like the question was, how does she do that? She feels into the person's energy, and she just picks up whatever the thought and emotion is. And she actually developed that ability as a young girl. When she was observing adults having conversations with each other, they were saying one thing, but she could actually sense that underneath there was another thought in them.
Very
which
emotionally intelligent.
very much so, yes. absolutely, very emotionally and spiritually intelligent. Yeah, absolutely. So with that ability then, well, let me give you an example, exactly. So this was one of Mada's client with whom she worked one-on-one in a few sessions. This woman was diagnosed with chronic headaches and MS. Before Mada started to work with her, this woman had like this triangle of a dark shadow over her face. And the yellow that you see around her is the conscious parts of her aura and her being. Afterwards, after the first session, that shadow was almost completely gone. What they discovered in that first session is that this woman had suffered from issues with controlling and being manipulating, both at the receiving and the giving end, which she had never expressed. She had just experienced it and made her assumptions and put those thoughts into her body, which then caused her to develop those headaches and the MS. After only 3 sessions, that lady's symptoms were completely gone. And she has never gone back to having any symptoms of MS or headaches. By becoming aware of those thoughts that she had carried for decades, look at them, release them, and take action with those new awarenesses and the life lessons that naturally emerged through the work with Mada, this woman was able to completely heal her body and turn her experience around.
How bad was it? How bad was she?
I think it was very much like the question was how bad were those woman's symptoms, and I would think they were pretty bad. I don't know exactly how to measure that, but for sure bad enough for her to invest her time and resources in seeking that kind of a help. So then Mada wanted to actually be able to help more people because she realized that in that becoming aware of what thoughts we carry in ourselves, just like with this lady, and by helping her become aware and look at the life lessons that she needed to learn and to transform those thoughts and beliefs into something positive that was life enhancing and moving her forward and connecting her with her true sense of self, Mada wanted to develop something so that we could all experience that kind of a shift and transformation. So she developed the Dalian Method as a very systematic and precise tool with which we can all do that by ourselves. So that we, when we follow the instructions in the Dalian Method or are guided and led and supported by a facilitator, all of you, each of you, you can tune into what those repressed thoughts are. And as you go through the session, let more restrictions and emotions and thoughts come up and beliefs that you used to buy into, and actually kind of like unearth them like layers of an onion. Start to peel away those weights of those thoughts that you have been carrying with you and transforming them for you. Also, through the Dalian Method and the way how it's designed, you get to actually see that all of those experiences and beliefs and emotions that you've carried with you for so long actually serve the purpose. You learn your life lessons from them. And then once you do that, you can let them go because they have served their purpose. You can release them and move on. And the more layers you release, the more of your true self, your true being can actually shine through. And I think that's exactly what happened when I started to feel that solid sense of self. That was my experience of exactly that. In that moment, I had peeled away enough of those layers and those restrictions to then be able to actually get in touch with my true self again, which we all have. Deep down, even if we don't always feel it, it's there for all of us. And this tool, I find personally, is a marvelous way of getting in touch with it again, and we can do it by ourselves. We don't need to run to therapy for 3 years once a week. This method, like for me, it was with 10 sessions that it gave me that experience of feeling solid inside myself again. And I'm still working with the method and growing more of that sense of solidity and growing who I really am and following my bliss and my direction and gaining more of that joy and happiness that so many of you also want to experience. So then, yeah, with this tool, we're able to actually release them and permanently release them and create that permanent and complete shift in ourselves. And the Dalian method is also a very practical tool in that after each session, once that we become aware of our life lessons and we gain some new awarenesses about ourselves, we actually are challenged to come up with some concrete action steps. Because we've been behaving in a certain way for so long, now with the new awareness, we are not all of a sudden turning around 180 degrees and are able to be different. And so we need to practice that. And that's what I love about this method as well, that it always has this very practical, pragmatic component for me to develop to create some action steps that I start acting on immediately in order to solidify and integrate those changes into my life immediately after those sessions. So her gift for us is this opportunity to actually take our health and healing into our own hands and to regain that sense of self that we were actually born with. And that is, I believe, our birthright. And it's totally achievable for each and every one of you to tap into that and regain that freedom that comes from it. One of the interesting aspects of the Dalian method is that it actually does not use the mind. It works with the mind, but it does not engage the mind in a way to figure things out. Because our mind is actually the biggest troublemaker in our life, right? Because it makes us come up with all of those limitations and restrictions. So to engage the mind and actually finding a solution is probably a pretty dumb idea. So the Dalian method does not use the mind. The awarenesses that people get when they use the Dalian method, they naturally come up from within. It's just a process. You can probably fight it, but if you are engaging in a session, why would you fight it? So your solutions, or not even solutions, your awarenesses, they come up organically and naturally. So you don't even need to use the mind. And the Dalian method is very effective in that it creates that complete and permanent shift, and it's very quick. Like for me to have experienced that shift within 6 months after decades of affirmations and coaching and counseling and seminars and whatnot, I find that it's amazing the speed with which it can achieve that. Chen, you had a question.
So you said with the mind, I find that when I think with my emotions, like the negative part of emotions, then it just doesn't work out.
Sorry, I'm not understanding.
Like when I think with the negative part of my emotions,
Mm-hmm.
so like let's say I'm angry or not feeling too good, if I speak in that world,
Yeah.
then for sure it doesn't work out as efficiently as I'd like it. So
what's your question?
I find that I was going to ask how do I improve that so I'm not thinking with my emotions, I'm thinking more logically and intuitively.
Mm-hmm. So the question was how somebody could become better at tuning in with their intuition and not following their emotions and being led by them is kind of that.
Yeah. Logic and think with my logic and my intuition over my emotions or my negative.
Right. Yeah. So my advice would be, or my suggestion would be, for you to actually start to actually release some of those emotions that are still stuck in you. Right? So that you come to a plain. What's that? Well, punching a hole in the wall might help for a little bit, but I don't think it's going to do the job. No, it's for you to start to become aware of what emotions you actually are still having inside of you, and to engage in a way so that you can release them, so that then you're operating from a much greater place of inner peace and of knowing yourself, which will offer you the foundation to then think more intuitively and use your logic and your cognitive mind, which is a beautiful gift, but use it in a much more effective and valuable way for yourself.
That's hard.
This work is not easy, yes, but what would you rather do? Like suffer for another 20, 30 years with anger stuffed inside? Or yeah, it's a choice. It's a choice, right? It's a choice. And this work is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. And at the same time, what you get out of it, I personally find, is so valuable. Like, I do not look back. I'm totally convinced that this way for me is, this tool is a way for me to develop myself further and to regain more and more of that joy and that confidence and that happiness that I was born with in the same way as you were born with. So the Dalian Method works with a whole person. So it doesn't just work with the mind like affirmations. It doesn't just work with the body like massages, right? It works with the whole person, with body, mind, spirit, and emotions, and our consciousness all at the same time, to then create that complete and permanent shift and transformation within you. And that's because, like, as human beings, we are not just the body, we are not just the mind, we are not just our emotions, we're all of it, and they all have their good purpose, right, in our experience in life. So to work with all of them at the same time makes sense and is very effective. So throughout the Dalian Method sessions, we work also with the chakra centers, and we use focused breathing, verbal expression of our thoughts and emotions that come up, as well as some body movement. And many methods do not use the knees or the feet, but in the Dalian Method, we actually also use the feet and the knees in order to also address the energy and the blockages that oftentimes in those lower parts of our body. So we work with the cognitive, unconscious, and subconscious mind, and we use our third eye to connect to our intuition and our inner vision as well. We work with our emotions. Yes, sometimes it's ugly and it's hard to look at those emotions. Like for me, I'm still surprised to the day how much anger comes up for me in those sessions. Like I had in one of my recent sessions, I started working around a thought form, a thought pattern that I had lived by or that had come up for me, which was, I don't want to work so hard. So that was one of my thought forms that I started to work with. And if you know me, you know that I'm a darn hard worker. I'm anything but lazy. But somehow there was this desire that, you know what, I'm tired of working so hard. And it had to also do with my upbringing. Like my parents, I had fabulous parents, and they were also very hardworking. And somehow I had picked up that I always had to work first before I could enjoy. So that kind of like was my upbringing. That was the thought form that I was working with. So in one of Mada's online courses, I tapped into that, you know what, no, I do not want to work so hard. So I started one of those sessions with that thought. And I was about 2 or 3 minutes into it. And I just, oh my God, like this burst of anger came out of me, right? And I just had to just let it rip, express it all out loud. Like, and really, like, I think I didn't punch a hole in the wall, but I definitely punched some cushion, something softer so that I wouldn't hurt myself. And I was so surprised by that. But that was just to show you how much I had repressed my individuality, I hadn't allowed myself to live out that anger and that disagreement with that rule of needing to work hard before I could enjoy. I had always repressed it for so long. And now all of that anger and that frustration just needed to come out. And guess what? Like afterwards, I felt so much better. But I would never have accessed that had I not started to work with this method in the way that it does, which is just brilliant. It just lets you connect with whatever needs to be brought up organically. So much to emotions. And then it works with our spirit as well. So the difference between the traditional healing methods and the Dalian method is, for one, that the Dalian method looks at consciousness as the master key to our healing and transformation. Remember the iceberg, the 90%? If we are able to transform that into consciousness, that's when our healing happens and our well-being. Yes, Roger.
If I traded the word consciousness or awareness, would I be accurate?
There is a fine distinction. Awareness is more you're becoming aware of something, you're noticing something in your mind. It comes up to your, like, you're becoming aware of it, like you notice something. Whereas consciousness is more like a state of being. It's a state of your whole, like your natural, yourself. It's your connection to the universe. That's more a consciousness. Does that make sense? I'm not too sure whether I explained it well, but that's as well as I get it. Let's discuss it in detail another time. Another distinctive factor of the Dalian method in comparison to other methods is that we actually find all our answers within ourselves. We are not relying on any external capacity or entity to tell us what we need to think or what we need to do. We find the answers for all of our questions, for all of our challenges and issues in ourselves, if we only care to look. And then we ground our awarenesses and life lessons in our whole body. We don't just work with one part of it, it's the whole body that gets basically to work with those new awarenesses so that we can ground them completely in who we are. And then this method creates rapidly a permanent healing and transformation. So the Dalian method helps us to get to the root causes of all our fears and illnesses and judgments and doubts that we are currently experiencing, because they're just the sum, the result of all of those emotions that we've stuffed up over decades. That's how our judgments and pains and illnesses are created in the end. The Dalian method also helps us to transform our ego mind, which is the mind that is attached to identities, to status quo, to the emotions. That ego gets transformed into consciousness, which again helps us to become more connected to our true nature. We get to learn our life lessons and then use them as we move forward and expand in the way how we interact with the world and how we show up in the world. We get to grow our intuition and trust. So just like for me, trust was an issue. I didn't trust myself, but now I'm way better in that area. And you actually get to love yourself again, which for me was also a big lesson, to actually say that I'm okay the way I am, that I don't have to criticize myself, and that even with my flaws, I'm darn okay. And I wasn't able to say that before, for sure not. And for sure not in front of an audience, which who knows how many people on YouTube will watch that. So that for me is success. That for me is a huge accomplishment, which I have not been able to achieve with any of the other methods that I used, as much as they helped me before. Another beautiful thing is that you no longer need to wait for approval or seek approval from anybody else but yourself. So you are your best judgment, your best judge of your actions, of what is right for you to say and to do, and not what is expected of you, because society wants you to behave in a certain way. Also, you develop courage. the courage to jump into the unknown and to be open to whatever great gifts and surprises it may hold for you. And you develop your courage to be you, be an individual, to do things your way. There is no longer the right or the wrong way, but there's your way. And you actually own that, regardless of whether people like it or not. It doesn't matter, because you for yourself have experience, and you know it in your body that this is the right way, because it's your way. Which then ends up in being excited about the life and actually enjoying it in the fullest way possible that you can possibly think of. So you can then actually manifest your potential and live it out to the fullest and be a blessing for yourself and all of the people around you. So you might be wondering, well, is this method for me or not? Well, it is for you, for sure, if you are tired of experiencing that emotional and physical pain. If you no longer want to dabble in doubt and fear and judgment, if you want to break out of that because you're just sick and tired of it. It's also for you if you are ready to take responsibility for your own health. You're maybe tired of having medication or going to a doctor or seeking other treatment. You know that there is health to be gained by you becoming conscious and getting in touch with that inner wisdom. It's also for you if you're like really eager and ready and interested in getting to know yourself. Who are you? What are your uniquenesses that you want and your gifts that you want to share with the world? Not the ones that you were told that's what expected. No, who are you really deep inside? And if you are keen to experience that confidence and joy and peace in your life, yes, then you are a good candidate to work with that method as well. And there are two ways on how you can do that. You can work with a home practice set, which is a set of 2 recordings and a book, this book here, which is by itself, it's a marvelous read. I highly recommend it. Doesn't come separately, though. It only comes in the set. When you buy a set like that, you also get free support calls with Mada about once every quarter. If you have questions about how to, like technical, practical questions about the session and how it works, you can do that. And then, of course, you can have facilitated sessions with a facilitator just like myself, in person or on Zoom. They're generally about 2.5 to 3 hours long. And they work well in combination with each other. The benefit of having a facilitator is that the facilitator encourages you not to shy away from your emotions. They may also catch you in not doing the process properly and to help you to actually go deeper and learn from your awarenesses and turn them into valuable action steps that will move you forward. So I'm going to close with a quote by Mada, which is that only by living your individuality can you experience true freedom, the kind that does not depend on anything external. Because you have all the wisdom, you have all the tools, you've got all the answers inside of you. And the world needs you to show up as individuals, and it would be my pleasure and delight to tell you more about the method or to support you in whatever your path is. For sure, I hope that if nothing else, that you've got a better understanding about this amazing tool and that you're walking away with something else to consider on your healing path. Are there any other questions? Yes, Charles.
On question number 1, how do I access?
Okay, so the question was, how do you access the book? This book can be bought individually. I do have a few copies here, so you could get your copy here. This book only comes with the home practice set, so that would be a complete set. Both products are available on Mada's website. I currently don't have all the information on my website yet. It's just about a month that I've been a facilitator, so there's work to be done for me to change my website so that you could order it online. Right now, you can go to madadalian.com and look at her shop, tab, and then take it from there. I do. Eventually, I will. right now it doesn't matter to me. Like I'd rather you have the book in your hands than that I get my resellers discount. Like for me, I'd rather you have the book sooner than later than to wait until I have my website ready. Might as well go and read it now. Yeah, you're welcome. Andrew.
Yeah, on one slide there was a statement, do not use mind.
Yeah.
To which mind do you refer that? Your conscious, unconscious, subconscious, take-over mind, there was quite a few of them.
Yes, there was that, oh, right. I need to repeat the question. The question was, on one of the slides, there was the mention that the Dalian method does not use the mind. And the question is, which part of the mind are we referring to? So it's the cognitive mind, the ego mind, that is not being used to find out the answers, to find the solutions. It's bypassed in the session. There was another session here. Yeah, Petra.
Yeah, for those who are interested in using the book and the recordings, would you recommend that they start with this?
The question was if the people that are interested in using the home practice set, if they actually start, if it would be best for them to actually start with a facilitated session. And yeah, without promoting necessarily myself as your facilitator, but yes, I would highly recommend that you do start with a facilitated session because it helps you to understand the components of the method, how to do it properly, to get a little bit more familiar with the process, and to then also create those action steps, which are essentially important. It helps to have a facilitator that holds your hand for the first session. And like, I'm totally transparent. If you don't resonate with me, if you want somebody else to work with you, like I can make 10 different connections to you to other Dalian Method facilitators. Again, I'd rather you work with somebody that you resonate with and that you get going sooner rather than later. Then it doesn't have to be me, as long as you do the work. Thank you for the question. Anybody else?
Consciousness of what are we missing? Is it key?
Consciousness is the key to your healing.
Of what?
Of all your pains and fears and doubts and limitations. Yeah, that's how that was meant. Yeah, one last question.
So what methods are used in the book?
What methods are used?
In the book? You just described that whole thing, but I didn't hear any methods. Meditating methods? How do you get to the center of your vision?
Okay, so the question was what kind of method are we actually using in the Dalian method? So the Dalian method is a combination. It's a recording. So the core of the Dalian method is a recording that Mada, the founder, the creator, has spoken herself. And she gives you prompts on what you need to do, like breathing. So one component is breathing and exhalation through certain parts of the body, like the chakra centers, the knees and your feet. And she gives you all those prompts. And then there's the verbal expression. Like I shared with you that I started one of my recent sessions with the statement that I don't want to work so hard. So the facilitator helps you to identify that starting statement. Or in the book, if you do the work by yourself at home, there are instructions on how you can identify that statement with which you start the session. And then as you go through the session, you follow the prompts. Naturally, there will be more awareness thoughts coming up and or emotions. And then you are, of course, encouraged to keep expressing whatever comes up, like those new thoughts that emerge and the emotions. And at the end, she guides you to a point where you actually realize what your lessons are, what your new awarenesses are. And it's almost magical, although it isn't, how that shift happens, right? It just does, right? And then you are encouraged at the end of the session to sit down, write down your awarenesses, and create some action steps that you can take in order to integrate those awarenesses and the transformation. Did that answer your question? Yeah, okay, thank you. One last question? No, okay. Thank you very much. This is my contact information, and I thank you very much for your attention, for your questions. And I can spell it.
Thank you. We'll stay in the box together.
We'll stay in the box together. There you go.
Monika, thank you for sharing this new way that we can harness to change our lives.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and when we change our
pleasure.
lives as human beings, we change our ability to be good business people.
Absolutely.
Build
Absolutely.
great businesses.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Create that success.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
And tell us, thank you for making this production possible.
Thank you, Talis.